Imagine a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning in Tokaimura, Japan. It's 1999, sun's coming up, people are heading off to work, maybe grabbing coffee, just a normal day.
Mm-hmm.
But then inside what seems like a pretty routine nuclear fuel processing plant, there's this brilliant, almost eerie blue flash.
Wow.
Suddenly, alarms are just screaming through the whole facility. And right there, in that instant, a quiet workday turns into this catastrophic fight against an invisible, deadly enemy, uncontrolled nuclear fission.
Just like that.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking that stack of sources you've curated, and we're peeling back the layers, really unpacking a deeply complex and tragic chapter in nuclear history, the Tokaimura nuclear accident.
It's not just the one people usually think of.
Exactly. We're not just talking about that infamous 1999 criticality crisis, but also a really crucial precursor event that happened just 2 years before, back in 1997. Our mission here is to take you beyond the headlines, extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from these pretty chilling events. We'll explore not just what happened, but why it happened, the harrowing human cost, and the profound, often difficult lessons learned.
And what's truly insightful here, I think, is that this isn't just some historical account of industrial accidents. It's really a critical look at the very fabric of industrial safety, regulatory oversight, and maybe most importantly, the human element in these high-stakes environments.
Yeah, the human side is key.
Definitely. Understanding these incidents offers crucial aha moments, about preventing future tragedies. Even in industries far away from nuclear power, it forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions, I think, about trust, accountability, and the inherent really complex risks when we harness immense power.
Yeah.
And maybe let complacency creep in.
Okay, let's unpack this. But to really get the gravity and the systemic nature of the 1999 accident, we kind of need to rewind a little bit first. Back to 1997 and to Tokaimura itself.
Right. Set the stage.
This small village, it's about 70 miles northeast of Tokyo, was, and it still is, a foundational hub for Japan's entire nuclear industry. Think of it like this sprawling, complex nuclear research, experimentation, manufacturing, waste facilities.
Everything nuclear.
Pretty much.
Right. Yeah.
If it had anything to do with nuclear power in Japan back then, chances are it was happening right there in Tokaimura.
And this concentration, it wasn't accidental. Japan, as a nation with, incredibly limited natural resources, has historically relied really heavily on nuclear power to meet its energy needs.
Huge part of their energy mix.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before Fukushima in 2011, nuclear power was supplying something like 30% of the country's electricity.
Yeah.
So places like Tokaimura became absolutely vital for national energy security,
Right.
which led to this significant concentration of facilities in one relatively small area. It became so deeply integrated into the community's fabric that nearly 1/3 of Tokaimura's population actually relied on the nuclear industry for their jobs.
Wow, 1/3.
Yeah, this wasn't just a place where nuclear facilities happened to be. It was, a nuclear town, deeply invested in the industry's success, and perhaps a bit in its perceived infallibility, too.
Okay, so it's March 11th, 1997, and our focus turns to one specific facility in this whole complex, the Power Reactor and Nuclear Fuel Development Corporation, or PNC, Radioactive Waste Bituminisation Facility.
You'll often hear it called DUNEN, too. That's the abbreviation they use in Japan.
Right, DUNEN. We'll probably use both. So the job of this PNC, this DUNEN facility, was pretty specific. Encasing low-level liquid radioactive waste in molten asphalt, or bitumen, basically solidifying it for safe storage.
Sounds routine enough for that industry anyway, maybe a bit messy.
Yeah, sounds like it. But on this particular day, they were trying something new, an experimental mix, using 20% less asphalt than they normally would.
And this is where the first, critical detail pops up.
Aye.
A real potential aha moment about systemic failure starting to emerge. At exactly 10 a.m., a gradual chemical reaction starts up inside one of these fresh barrels.
Just starts reacting on its own.
Yeah, the internal heat from this reaction was enough to ignite the contents, which were already pretty hot. And the fire, once it sparked, it spread quickly to several nearby barrels.
Okay.
Now, what's really concerning here, and a clear red flag, is that the workers on site failed to properly put out the fire immediately.
They couldn't contain it.
Apparently not. Smoke and radiation alarms start blaring through the facility, forcing everyone to evacuate the building.
Right.
This initial failure, to control what really should have been a manageable industrial fire, especially in a nuclear waste facility, already points to some significant underlying safety culture issues. Maybe a disregard for basic emergency response.
And it absolutely got worse from there. For hours, the situation just simmered. The contents of the barrels kept heating up, reacting. Then at 8 p.m. that evening, just as some people were maybe getting ready to go back in, check the damage,
Oh, good.
boom, the built-up flammable gases inside ignited, led to a powerful secondary explosion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the force of it was enough to break windows, doors, basically creating direct paths for smoke and, much worse, radiation to escape out into the air onto the land.
The immediate impact was alarming. And the initial response from the den management was, well, frankly, it was betrayal of public trust.
How so?
Well, the government's Science and Technology Agency, the STA, they initially reported 37 nearby personnel were exposed to trace amounts of radiation, but they were quick to declare it the country's worst nuclear accident up to that point.
Okay, so they knew it was serious.
Oh, yeah. It got rated a level 3 on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the INES scale. Now, to give you some context, a level 3 incident means, like, a serious functional issue or maybe minor consequences for the public. Think maybe a big factory fire where public safety is impacted, but it's mostly contained on site.
Gotcha.
But then, a week later, meteorological officials detected unusually high levels of cesium, a radioactive element, as far as 40 kilometers. That's like 25 miles southwest of the plant.
Oh, that far.
Yeah, indicating the radioactive plume had traveled much further than they initially thought. And aerial views of the facility tragically showed this damaged roof, which meant continued external radiation exposure was possible for anyone nearby. A critical detail often missed in the first reports.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, deeply concerning. The Dunedin management, they mandated 2 workers to falsely report the timeline, the chronological events leading up to the evacuation.
Deliberately falsify records.
Exactly. A deliberate top-down attempt to cover up their own glaring lack of proper supervision, not following safety protocols. And even worse, the Dunedin leadership delayed reporting the fire to the STA.
No. Why would they do that?
Well, this critical delay basically handcuffed the immediate emergency response teams, prevented them from deploying quickly, and it just prolonged the radioactivity exposure for everyone in the vicinity, the workers initially exposed, and potentially the whole community.
That's criminal. The deception ran deep then. The initial information they gave the public was actively misleading. Dunedin officials first reported only a 20% increase in radiation levels nearby.
Only 20%.
Yeah, but later, through independent measurements and investigations, it was revealed the true level was 10 times higher than what they first published.
10 times?
Unbelievable. This shocking erosion of trust, plus the clear evidence of mismanagement, the deliberate cover-up, it fueled massive public outcry. Residents of Tokaimura were, understandably, enraged.
I bet.
They demanded criminal prosecution of Dunedin officials, a complete reorganization of the company leadership, even the permanent closure of the plant itself. Prime Minister Ryutaro Hashimoto himself publicly criticized the delay, highlighting how serious the management's actions were and the sort of casualness with which they treated public safety.
So what happened to the facility? It was ultimately closed, yes. But perhaps most chillingly, it actually reopened in November 2000.
Reopened after all that.
Yeah, albeit in a different capacity, as a nuclear fuel reprocessing plant. It's just a stark detail, isn't it, that something with such a checkered safety record could eventually be back in operation. Suggests maybe that drive for energy security sometimes overrides even profound safety concerns.
So if we step back a bit,
Right.
what is this level 3 incident and its whole aftermath? What does it really tell us about public safety?
Well,
It means even a supposedly contained industrial accident, when you pile on deceit and mismanagement, can have really far-reaching public health and trust implications. And how does a management cover-up erode trust? It's just profoundly damaging.
destroys it completely.
Totally. It doesn't just betray the public, it undermines the entire regulatory system that's supposed to protect them. This incident, happening just 2 years before the much, much worse criticality crisis, clearly showed this deep-seated lack of a proper safety culture, lack of accountability within parts of Japan's nuclear industry.
Yep.
It paints a vivid picture for us, right? Highlighting how unaddressed issues, especially systemic ones like a culture of secrecy, cutting corners, how they can and often do escalate. You could argue pretty strongly, I think, that the seeds of the 1999 tragedy were arguably sown in the unlearned lessons and, frankly, unpunished deceptions of 1997.
A clear warning ignored.
After.
And escalate absolutely did. So now we shift our focus from that PNC Junin facility at the waste place to a different one. It's about 4 miles away, the JCO facility.
Okay, different place, different company.
Yeah, JCO was a subsidiary of Sumitomo Metal Mining Company, and its purpose was far more sensitive than waste processing. It was fuel enrichment. specifically converting uranium hexafluoride into enriched uranium dioxide fuel for Japan's power plants, research reactors, the real core stuff.
And the distinction here is absolutely crucial. Enriching nuclear fuel, actually manipulating fissile material like uranium, it requires absolute pinpoint precision. And it carries extreme, almost unfathomable risks, because if you do it improperly, if you mix these nuclear products the wrong way, you can inadvertently trigger an uncontrolled fission reaction. We call it criticality accident.
Blue flash thing.
That's the terrifying signature, yeah. This, in turn, emits devastating gamma and neutron radiation. So, unlike the waste facility, this plant was dealing with the raw, highly reactive ingredients that directly power reactors. And that potential for an uncontrolled chain reaction just makes the stakes astronomically higher.
And this is where we really start to uncover the systemic issues that, well, laid the groundwork for the disaster. Multiple layers of failure, not just simple human error.
Right.
First off, a shocking lack of regulatory oversight. The JCO facility had no criticality accident alarm system.
Wait, what? In a fuel enrichment plant? No alarm for the worst possible thing.
Unthinkable, right, but why? Because the licensing board had incorrectly concluded that a criticality accident simply could not happen there.
They just assumed it was impossible.
They deemed the worst-case scenario impossible, basically. And so they didn't even prepare for it. It's just this terrifying example of institutional hubris, I guess, where assumptions just completely trumped prudence.
It's not all, is it?
No, the site wasn't even included in the National Plan for the Prevention of Nuclear Disasters.
Jesus.
Yeah, which directly led to critical delays in telling the nearby public when the accident did happen. Imagine the chaos, the confusion for residents when there's no clear protocol for public notification in a nuclear emergency.
Awful. And the regulator.
They consistently failed to conduct routine, thorough inspections. Inspections to make sure that the production process was being done correctly and, crucially, safely. It just paints this disturbing picture of a profound disconnect between the regulatory bodies and the reality on the ground inside the facilities they were supposed to be overseeing.
Wow. So beyond those glaring regulatory failures, you also had immense internal pressure within JCO itself.
The pressure cooker.
Right. The company was facing reduced revenue. They had gone through significant layoffs, creating this environment where efficiency and speed were suddenly prioritized above pretty much everything else.
Cutting corners to save money.
Essentially, this internal pressure pushed them towards making fuel at an infrequently produced higher enrichment level, up to 20% radium-235. Now, what's truly astounding, and maybe the most damning indictment of JCO's management, is that the company knew the correct approved procedure for this higher enrichment level probably wouldn't get approved by the regulator, the STA.
So what did they do?
Rather than seeking approval or
No.
changing their production, they just did not submit
They
it.
just hit it.
They just went ahead with their own way. And a legal procedure wasn't just employed, it was actively ingrained into their process. Technicians, under pressure to cut corners and speed things up, skipped several key safety steps in the enrichment process.
Like what?
Instead of following the approved protocols, they started pouring the uranyl nitrate solution by hand in stainless steel buckets
Yeah.
directly into a precipitation tank.
Buckets? Seriously, like hardware store buckets.
Stainless steel, but yeah, essentially just buckets. This deviation, driven by this, perverse mix of convenience, efficiency, and a blatant disregard for safety, was a direct ticking violation of established procedures. This wasn't a one-off mistake. It was how they did things. It was a deeply embedded shortcut.
Which brings us to that fateful morning, September 30, 1999. The team on shift, there were 3 technicians, Hisashi Ouchi, Masato Shinovara, and their supervisor, Yutaka Yokokawa.
Okay.
They were under intense pressure, rushing to speed up the fuel conversion process. They needed to meet urgent shipping requirements for the juiced experimental fast breeder reactor.
And this was what, JCO's first batch of this particular fuel in 3 years?
Exactly. Which meant the team lacked recent experience with this specific process. And crucially, there were no proper qualification and training requirements established for it either.
Another huge red flag. That lack of recent experience, proper updated training. It's another critical systemic failure that just screams out from the sources. So the team falls back on what they think is okay, this convenience method, mixing chemicals in stainless steel buckets.
They thought it was okay.
Well, they were in fact following an internal JCO operating manual, a manual that had somehow become standard practice within the company. But, and this is devastating, they were completely unaware that this internal guidance, the one they'd been taught, the one that was widely distributed, was not approved by the STA, the national regulator.
So the company's own manual was wrong or illegal?
It directly contradicted the official safety standards. It just highlights this dangerous, life-threatening disconnect between internal company practices and mandated safety rules. Speaks to a profound breakdown in safety culture.
Okay, let's break down what should have happened versus what they actually did, and the critical design flaw that turned this shortcut into an absolute catastrophe.
Right. The correct approved procedure, it stipulated that the uranyl nitrate should first be stored inside a tall, narrow buffer tank.
Why tall and narrow?
Geometry. That tank was specifically designed to prevent criticality by controlling the shape and volume of the solution. Spreads it out, makes it less likely to react. From there, the solution should have been gradually pumped into the final precipitation tank in small controlled increments, no more than 2.4 kilograms, about 5.3 pounds, at a time.
Slow and steady.
Exactly. This slow, controlled method is absolutely essential for preventing a critical mass from forming.
But the team, following their unapproved internal manual,
They bypassed these critical buffer tanks entirely, poured the uranyl nitrate directly into the precipitation tank, and here's where the design of that specific tank became a death trap.
how so?
This precipitation tank, it had this wide cylindrical shape. It was not designed to hold unlimited quantities of this solution and was, in fact, inherently favorable to criticality. Think about it like trying to light a bonfire. You pile the fuel close together, right? That wide cylindrical tank was like a perfect bonfire pit where the uranium atoms could easily see each other and react. The correct narrow tank, on the other hand, that was like trying to light the same bonfire but with all the wood spread out in a long, thin line. Much, much harder to get a self-sustaining fire going.
Got it. So they used the wrong tank, bypassed the safety steps, and kept pouring. Then, at approximately 10:35 a.m., the unthinkable happened. Critical mass was reached. This occurred when the fill level of the tank, containing about 16 kilograms, 35 pounds of uranium, was hit after they added a seventh bucket.
Seventh bucket.
Think about that. 16 kilograms of uranium. Almost 7 times the legal mass limit specified by the STA. It was just an accident waiting to happen, meticulously engineered by deviation and complacency.
And in that precise moment, the uncontrolled nuclear fission, that self-sustaining chain reaction, began immediately. An instant violent release of energy, emitting intense gamma and neutron radiation.
And the blue flash.
Exactly. All 3 technicians witnessed that distinctive, eerie blue flash. Cherenkov radiation. The visual proof that an uncontrolled nuclear reaction is happening. Almost simultaneously, gamma radiation alarms started screaming throughout the facility, confirming the disaster.
Imagine seeing that blue flash. What does that tell you about the immediate danger? It tells you the impossible just happened, that a chain reaction supposed to be locked down inside a reactor core is now happening out in the open in a processing tank, totally uncontrolled.
Yeah.
How quickly did a series of small, seemingly convenient deviations snowball into this full-blown nuclear catastrophe? Almost instantly, that blue light, that invisible enemy, was already tearing through them.
The immediate aftermath was just chaotic, terrifying. Hisashi Ouchi and Masato Shinohara, they were right there by the tank. They immediately felt this searing pain, intense nausea, difficulty breathing.
Right.
Instantly. Ouchi, who got the largest dose, he vomited right there in the decontamination room. Quickly started having trouble moving, speaking coherently. Then rapidly lost consciousness. Yutaka Yokokawa, the supervisor, he was sitting a few meters away, also feeling the agonizing effects.
Did they get out?
The 3 technicians managed to evacuate, yeah. But they were utterly unaware of the full impact of what had just happened, or even the proper reporting criteria, another massive failing in training.
So who raised the alarm?
It was actually another worker in a nearby building who realized how severe their injuries were, saw their condition, and contacted emergency medical assistance. By then, fission products, the radioactive byproducts of the chain reaction, had already contaminated the fuel reprocessing building and the area. Emergency services arrived, started escorting other workers to muster zones, trying to establish some kind of order in the unfolding chaos.
And the reaction itself, did it stop after the flash?
Terrifyingly, no. It produced continuous chain reactions for over 20 hours.
20 hours.
Think about that. Over an entire day of uncontrolled nuclear fission, just leaking radiation. It wasn't until the next morning, nearly a full day later, that workers were finally able to end the chain reaction.
How? What did they do?
First, they had to drain water from the cooling jacket that surrounded the precipitation tank. This water, ironically, had been acting as a neutron reflector.
A reflector, like a mirror.
Essentially, yeah, acting like a mirror for tiny particles, bouncing the energy bullets of the neutrons back into the uranium, basically forcing the reaction to keep going. Removing this water finally began to starve the reaction of those reflected neutrons.
Okay, so removing the water helps slow it down.
Right, but they needed to be sure it was stopped. So then they added a boric acid solution to the tank itself.
Boric acid.
Yeah, boron is an excellent neutron absorber, it just soaks them up. That helped reduce the contents finally to subcritical levels, bringing the terrifying, uncontrolled reaction to a halt. It was a desperate, extremely high-stakes maneuver to stop what could have become an even wider disaster.
This is where the technical data just crashes into profound human suffering, a truly agonizing chapter.
Absolutely. The scale of exposure was immense, reached far beyond those first 3 workers. At least 667 people, workers, first responders, nearby residents, were exposed to excess radiation.
667 people.
Of those, 39 workers were confirmed to have received significant doses. But the 3 technicians right at the center of it, they bore the unimaginable brunt. Hisashi Ouchi was exposed to an estimated 17 sieverts S of radiation, Masato Shinohara to 10 S's, and Yutaka Yokokawa to 3 S's.
Okay, sieverts. Can you put those numbers in perspective for us? What does that actually mean?
Right, so a sievert measures the biological effect of radiation. To give you context, the maximum allowable annual dose for Japanese nuclear workers at the time was just 50 millisieverts. That's 0.05 sieverts.
0.05.
Exactly. So Ouchi's exposure, 17 SVs, was 340 times the maximum annual dose. Shinohara's 10 SVs was 200 times. These exposures weren't just orders of magnitude higher, they were well into the range considered immediately fatal or causing severe acute radiation sickness. Put simply, their bodies were hit with enough energy to just tear apart their cells on a massive systemic scale.
Hisashi Ouchi's story, his struggle really highlights the devastating human cost, the absolute horror of an accident like this.
It's hard to comprehend. He was just 35 years old, transported to the University of Tokyo Hospital where he endured an agonizing 83 days of treatment. His body had suffered catastrophic, irreversible damage.
Like what?
Severe radiation burns across most of his body, extensive, irrecoverable damage to his internal organs, and his white blood cell count dropped to near zero, rendering his immune system completely non-functional. They had to place him in a special radiation ward to try and limit hospital-acquired infections, which became this constant, overwhelming threat because his own body just couldn't fight back.
The medical details are just heartbreaking. They paint this picture of relentless suffering, a micrograph of his chromosomes, right? The very building blocks of his life. It showed that none of them were identifiable.
Shattered.
Think about that. The blueprint of his cells, the core of his being, just shattered beyond recognition by the radiation. Doctors attempted these desperate medical interventions, including a peripheral blood stem cell transplantation from his sister, which was a cutting-edge experimental treatment back then. A glimmer of hope.
And initially, there was a temporary, fleeting increase in white blood cell counts. A tiny flicker of hope for the medical team, for his family. But Ouchi's condition just continued its relentless, devastating decline.
They tried skin grafts, too, didn't they?
Repeatedly. Cultured skin graft to try and cover the severe burns that covered so much of his body. Constantly trying to repair the damage. He was given this cocktail of powerful drugs. Continuous painkillers for unimaginable pain, broad-spectrum antibiotics to fight off infections his body couldn't handle, granulocyte colony-stimulating factors to try and boost his decimated blood cell production.
But nothing worked long-term.
Despite immense, truly heroic efforts by the medical team, there was just this tragic lack of measurable success. No real improvement. His fight was against an enemy that had already won at a cellular level. The damage was too profound.
And this created an almost unimaginable ethical dilemma for the medical staff, didn't it?
It did. They privately debated, doubted whether treatment should even continue, given the clear lack of effectiveness and, more profoundly, their concern for the immense unceasing pain Ouchi was clearly experiencing.
God.
2 months after the accident, Ouchi suffered a cardiac arrest. He was revived, but by then he'd become largely unresponsive. His body was enduring, but his consciousness was fading.
But the family wanted them to continue.
Despite the clear medical reality that the radiation damage was simply too extensive to be survivable, doctors continued treatment as family's wishes. They held on to this desperate hope. It wasn't until December 19th when doctors painstakingly explained the utter gravity of his condition, the irreversible nature of the cellular destruction, that his family finally agreed to a do not resuscitate order.
A DNR.
Yeah. His wife had held on to the hope he might survive until January 1st, 2000, a new millennium, a new beginning. But his body finally succumbed to multiple organ failure. He died on December 21st, 1999, after another cardiac arrest. 83 days. 83 days of agonizing decline. A profound and horrifying testament to the true cost of these accidents.
And his colleague, Masato Shinohara, he was 40, also taken to the same facility. His battle was equally valiant, though slightly longer.
Right. He underwent radical cancer treatments, numerous successful skin grafts, even a transfusion from congealed umbilical cord blood, another innovative attempt to boost his stem cell count, give him a fighting chance.
How long did he survive?
He survived for 7 months, which is a testament to the doctor's incredible efforts, really. But ultimately, he succumbed to radiation-exacerbated infections and internal bleeding. Died April 27, 2000, from multiple organ failure, specifically fatal lung and kidney failure.
2 lives lost in the most horrific way. And the third technician? Yokokawa.
Yutaka Yokokawa, the supervisor, he was 54. He received a less severe, though still very significant, 3-sievert exposure. Treated at the National Institute of Radiological Sciences, released 3 months later with minor radiation sickness, mostly related to lowered white blood cells.
But he faced charges later, right?
He did. Negligence charges, underscoring the different levels of accountability and direct impact in this tragedy. He survived, but, with the knowledge of what his colleagues endured and the legal ramifications hanging over him.
Beyond the immediate victims, the broader community felt this chilling, invisible impact, too.
Massively. By mid-afternoon on September 30th, just hours after the accident, plant workers and residents within a 350-meter radius, that's 161 people from 39 households, they were evacuated.
Okay, the immediate zone.
Then, 12 hours after the incident, a staggering 300,000 residents in the surrounding area were told to stay indoors and cease all agricultural production.
300,000 people told to shelter in place?
Yeah. That restriction was only lifted the next afternoon, but imagine the fear, the confusion, the disruption to daily life for hundreds of thousands of people.
Must have been chaos.
Indeed. There was this profound lack of an established emergency plan or clear public communication from GCO, which just amplified the confusion and panic. Authorities warned locals not to harvest crops or drink well water, creating immense uncertainty about the safety of their very livelihoods, their food, their water.
So what did they do? Checkups?
Over the next 10 days, yeah. About 10,000 medical checkups were conducted on residents to assess their exposure, a massive undertaking that really revealed the scale of public anxiety. And what's truly alarming is that radioactive gas levels in the area stayed high even after the plant was supposedly sealed. It was only on October 12th, nearly 2 weeks after the accident, that they discovered a roof ventilation fan had been left on, allowing continued release. They finally shut it down.
2 weeks later. That's shocking.
It highlights the ongoing failures in the immediate response, doesn't it?
And there was that really unique detail about gold, right?
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating and kind of surreal. Sometime after the incident, people in the area were actually asked to lend any gold they had, jewelry, whatever, to help estimate the neutron flux the public had been exposed to.
Why gold? How does that work?
Well, when neutrons, those tiny, powerful particles driving the reaction, hit gold, they temporarily make the gold radioactive in a very specific, measurable way.
Yeah.
By measuring that induced radioactivity in the gold people lent them, they could estimate the neutron flux, basically how many of those dangerous particles have been zipping around and potentially affecting the public.
Wow. Imagine being asked for your wedding ring to measure radiation.
Utterly surreal for residents, I'm sure. Part of a nuclear disaster assessment.
So how was the incident classified in the end?
It was ultimately classified as irradiation, not contamination. That's a technical distinction, meaning exposure to radiation rather than physical contact with radioactive materials. And it was rated level 4 on the INES scale, an accident with local consequences.
Local consequences. Seems like an understatement given 300,000 people were told to stay inside.
Well, this determination initially labeled the situation as low risk outside the facility compared to the direct site, a judgment that would definitely be scrutinized later for maybe downplaying the widespread fear and disruption. Thankfully, while low levels of radioactivity were found in some vegetation within 10 kilometers, none was detected in dairy products, water, or sea products. But the fear, the disrupting, the human suffering endured by the workers and the community, that was very real and deeply impactful.
Okay, so now let's move beyond the human suffering, horrific as it is, to really unpack the systemic failures, the root causes that allowed these tragedies to unfold in the first place.
Right, digging deeper.
The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, they concluded the cause wasn't just human error. It was a devastating combination of human error and serious breaches of safety principles.
Which is crucial. It wasn't just the workers' fault.
Exactly. While technicians certainly poured the product by hand using unapproved buckets, and yes, they were inexperienced, it was JCO's first batch of that fuel in 3 years. No proper qualification or training requirements. The blame doesn't stop there. It goes much, much deeper.
And what's critical to understand is the institutionalized nature of these errors. This wasn't just a few rogue employees making a one-off mistake.
It was embedded.
Completely.
Yeah.
You had deeply inadequate supervision, tragically obsolete, even dangerous procedures being actively followed. A 1995 JCO Safety Committee had actually approved the use of steel buckets in the procedure.
The committee approved the buckets.
Apparently so. And a widely distributed but unauthorized 1996 internal manual actually recommended using buckets. This is just mind-boggling. It shows that unsafe practices weren't just deviations, they were formally internally sanctioned, despite being fundamentally flawed and against external regulations.
That's astonishing. So it wasn't just a deviation, it was a practice that had become totally embedded within the company culture, despite being fundamentally unsafe. It raises a huge question. How could something so fundamentally dangerous persist for so long without external regulators catching it, or without someone internally speaking up more forcefully?
Precisely. An STA report indicated that JCO management had knowingly permitted these hazardous practices since 1993.
Since 93, 6 years before the accident.
Yeah, to shortcut the conversion process, directly contrary to approved nuclear chemical handling procedures. This speaks volumes about a pervasive culture of complacency. The company had operated for over 15 years without a major incident, which, paradoxically, often leads employees and management alike to become less vigilant. They simply started to believe an accident couldn't happen to them.
That it can't happen here syndrome.
Exactly. There was also a significant lack of communication between the engineers who understood the risks and the workers on the floor, which contributed to the failure to properly report when the incident initially arose.
And what's truly chilling, as the sources suggest, is that connection back to 1997. Had the company actually corrected the errors, addressed the clear issues identified after that Dunan bituminisation facility explosion,
The 1999 criticality incident might have been considerably less devastating, or maybe even entirely prevented. The warnings were absolutely there. But the systemic problems persisted, they festered, and ultimately they exploded with far, far greater consequences.
and this connects directly to broader governance failures, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The 2012 report by the National Diet of Japan Fukushima Nuclear Accident Independent Investigation Commission, a really thorough, critical look at nuclear safety, after Fukushima noted that the regulatory and nuclear industry overconfidence, coupled with profound governance failures, applied equally to the Tokaimura accidents as they did to Fukushima years later.
So the same underlying problems.
It raises that important question. Are some lessons just harder to learn than others? Or is there an inherent, almost inevitable vulnerability in human systems when we're dealing with such powerful, complex technologies? It suggests a deeper problem than just isolated incidents.
Okay, so what about accountability? Legal repercussions. Did anyone face consequences?
JCO certainly did. By March 2000, JCO's credentials for operation were canceled. A landmark decision. It was the first Japanese plant operator ever to be punished by law for mishandling nuclear radiation.
A clear signal, then.
Definitely. A clear signal that the era of just apologies and internal investigations was over. The government was finally taking a much stronger stance.
And individuals?
This was followed by the company president's resignation. In October, 6 officials from JCO, including the chief of the production department, were charged with professional negligence.
Negligence for what specifically?
The charges stemmed directly from their failure to properly train technicians and for knowingly subverting safety procedures. Yutaka Yukokawa, the supervisor who survived the criticality accident. He was among those arrested for his failure to supervise the proper procedures. The JCO president also pleaded guilty on behalf of the company, accepting corporate responsibility, a crucial step in acknowledging the systemic nature of the failures.
And compensation for the victims and the community.
A massive, unprecedented effort there. In October 1999, right after the accident, JCO set up advisory booths to process claims and inquiries from people affected by radiation evacuations, the disruption to their lives, their businesses.
How many claims?
By July 2000, less than a year later, over 7,000 compensation claims were filed and settled. And in September 2000, JCO agreed to pay a staggering $121 million in compensation.
Wow, $121 million.
Yeah, to settle 6,875 claims from people exposed to radiation and affected agricultural and service businesses. And crucially, all residents within that 350-meter zone and those forced to evacuate received compensation, provided they agreed not to sue the company in the future. A massive financial acknowledgement of corporate responsibility.
And did this lead to actual reforms, real changes in the industry?
Oh, yes. The incidents spurred sweeping reforms throughout Japan's nuclear industry. Special laws were put in place, stipulating much stricter operational safety procedures, quarterly inspection requirements, with a particular focus on the proper conduct of workers and leadership.
So hitting both levels.
Exactly. This change mandated both rigorous safety education and quality assurance across all nuclear power generation facilities and activities, a far cry from the previous complacency.
And oversight improved.
From 2000 onwards, Japan's atomic and nuclear commissions began regular, rigorous investigations of facilities. They expanded education regarding proper procedures and, vitally, pushed for a shift towards a robust safety culture regarding handling nuclear chemicals and waste. New systems were implemented for emergency preparedness to comply with international guidelines, all in an effort to prevent anything like Tokaimura from ever happening again. These were profound shifts, directly spurred by the deep public outrage and the undeniable failures.
Yet those enduring tensions remain, don't they? That persistent challenge for Japan.
Absolutely. The nation still imports around 80% of its energy. That creates mounting pressure for self-sustaining energy sources. The Strategic Energy Plan of 2014, formulated years after these accidents, even after Fukushima, still names nuclear as an important power source for stable energy supply, despite the inherent risks we've just discussed.
In the anti-nuclear movement.
The Tokaimura accident significantly contributed to the rise of powerful anti-nuclear activist movements in Japan. It's a debate that continues fiercely to this day, balancing that undeniable need for energy security with the paramount safety of the population. It really highlights a fundamental, incredibly difficult choice for any nation reliant on such powerful technology. How much risk is truly acceptable when the consequences of failure are so utterly catastrophic?
So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us, for you listening? The Tokaimura accidents, both the 1997 precursor and that devastating 1999 criticality crisis, they serve as just such a stark reminder.
Yeah.
They highlight that these catastrophic events, they often aren't just the result of a single isolated human error. Instead, they're typically the culmination of this complex interplay of systemic regulatory failures, intense corporate pressure, a deeply complacent safety culture that allows dangerous shortcuts to become standard practice, and just a shocking disregard for established, approved procedures.
And the profound human suffering, epitomized by Hisashi Ouchi's agonizing struggle, just underscores the unimaginable personal consequences when these systems fail.
These lessons from Tokaimura, they extend far beyond the nuclear industry, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They apply to any high-risk environment you might encounter:
Right.
aviation, medicine, even complex project management in business. What does it teach us about the importance of speaking up? When you see unsafe practices, even small deviations that seem convenient,
Yeah.
what about challenging shortcuts, even if they're ingrained or seem harmless in the short term? And how crucial is robust, independent oversight? Not just on paper, but active, real-world inspections, even in environments that seem stable or have been incident-free for years.
The Tokaimura accidents serve as this stark, unforgettable reminder. When we harness immense power, whether it's nuclear energy, advanced AI, even the power of large organizations, our greatest vulnerability often lies not in the technology itself, but in the systems, the culture, and the human decisions we put around it. So the question for you is, what steps can you take in your own sphere to challenge complacency, to question assumptions, and to champion safety, recognizing that even small deviations, when they're left unchecked, can have truly catastrophic consequences? It's a question worth pondering, I think, as we navigate our increasingly complex and interconnected world.